What happens when soldiers who have kept quiet for too long decide that silence is no longer enough? On the morning of June 4th, 1979, Ghana woke up not to the usual sound of market women calling out or the buzz of trotro engines, but to the heavy sound of boots, gunfire, and a country gripped by fear and surprise. This was not a carefully planned coup hatched in secret meetings. It was a spontaneous uprising born out of anger, hunger, and frustration, led by young, neglected soldiers who had nothing left to lose. This is the true story of the June 4th uprising, an event that shook Ghana like a thunderstorm and demanded the country reckon with itself. Back in the early years after independence, Ghana was full of hope. Nkrumah had promised unity, prosperity, and a future built on Pan-African ideals. But by the late 1970s, that dream had faded. Ghana was no longer being led by visionary thinkers. Instead, it was under the control of military leaders who ruled without accountability. Corruption had spread, public money was being misused. While the city lost its value, those in power enjoyed expensive imported drinks and food. Meanwhile, ordinary people could hardly afford salt for their kenkey. Government workers were unpaid for months. Families struggled to eat, and the military, especially the junior ranks, felt forgotten. Generals lived comfortably, but young soldiers lacked basic supplies like proper boots, working guns, or even regular meals. Among these frustrated soldiers was a passionate and bold young pilot named Jerry John Rawlings. Though he was young, he had strong beliefs and wasn't afraid to speak up. On May 15, 1979, Rawlings and a few loyal soldiers tried to overthrow the ruling government, the Supreme Military Council, but they did not succeed. Rawlings was arrested, beaten, and put on trial. But instead of breaking under pressure, Rawlings used his trial to speak directly to Ghanaians. In full view of the public, he explained why he acted, pointing out the deep corruption in the system and naming those who had brought the country to its knees. He did not apologize. He promised that he would return not for power, but to bring justice. People outside the courtroom cheered. Many Ghanaians, students, workers, and soldiers who had long felt ignored now felt that someone was finally speaking for them. Then everything changed quickly. On the night of June 3rd, 1979, a group of junior soldiers, angry at what had happened to Rawlings and inspired by his words, broke into the guardroom and freed him. They armed themselves and began a full-blown military revolt. By the morning of June 4th, Accra was no longer under the control of the old government. The city was in the hands of the rebellious soldiers. Army camps fell one by one. The presidential residence, Flagstaff House, was surrounded. Those in power could not fight back. Rawlings, now free again, was not interested in revenge. He was focused on correcting the wrongs that had been allowed for too long. The country waited nervously to hear what would happen next. What followed was shocking. High-ranking officers who had ruled Ghana with greed and selfishness were arrested. Some were brought before special courts and found guilty. They were executed by firing squad at the Teshi military range. Generals like Echampon, Coup, and Utuka, once seen as untouchable, were shot. For some, it was a harsh punishment. For others, it was justice. For some, it felt like something that had to happen. It wasn't just a punishment, it was a cleansing of a system that had lost its way. Rawlings and the group that led the uprising, known as the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, took control of the country. For the next 112 days, they ran Ghana with one mission: clean the house. They did not stop at former leaders. They went after corrupt businessmen, people evading taxes, and others taking advantage of the broken system. Markets were cleaned up and restocked. People hoarding goods were punished. The value of the city was reassessed, and for a short while it felt like real change was finally happening. People began to believe in accountability. But the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council knew their leadership wasn't meant to last forever. They had made a promise, and in September 1979 they kept it. They handed over to a civilian government led by Dr. Hilla Lehman. Ghana had returned to democracy. Still, what happened on June 4th did not fade away. It stayed in the minds of the people. It became part of Ghana's identity. It left behind different feelings: hope, fear, pride, pain. For some, it was the day Ghana stood up for itself. For others, it was the day the country replaced dialogue with violence. But no matter how it's remembered, no one forgets it. June 4th became more than a date. It became a symbol, a mirror. It showed what could happen when power goes unchecked, when greed grows, and when leaders forget the people they serve. It raised a painful question. If people cannot find justice through peaceful means, will they be forced to take it into their own hands? In 1979, Ghana responded with loud defiance and unstoppable action. So today, if you ever walk through the streets of Accra and see young people asking tough questions or demanding better for their leaders, remember, this happened before. History has already lit the match, and the flame of June 4th still burns quietly in the hearts of those who refuse to forget.